Good day and welcome to Mississippi Happening. We're covering Voodoo Fest this weekend and we are lucky enough to be here with Mr. Thomas Dolby. He has a new album coming out that is actually an entire transmedia project that we'll get into called A Map to the Floating City. So Thomas, thanks so much for giving us some time today. Now with Mississippi Happening, we're really interested in revealing the broad narrative of the creative economy in Mississippi. And so there were a lot of aspects that interested me about your project because you touch on so many creative areas with this project. And interestingly, I'd like to start with your studio, the Nutmeg of Consolation. It's powered by renewable energies, and it seemed like maybe you put a lot of thought into that design. We have an active Green Building Council, and I know that they listen to the show, so I was wondering if you could talk about some of your thoughts that went into the design of that.
Sure. Well, the area I live in the UK, East Anglia, like Louisiana, is basically sinking. The British Isles are tipping towards the east, and what with that and global warming, it's only a matter of time, right? And there are villages up and down our coast that are no more, they're under the waves now. So I couldn't have a studio in a garden shed like most, ex-pop stars do. So I came up with the idea of initially putting a studio on floats, and then I thought, well, why not have a boat? I love boats, I love old wood and timber and so on. So I found on eBay a 1930s ship's lifeboat, and I found some local traditional boat builders to help me convert it into a studio, and it sits on blocks in my garden facing the North Sea. And I took out the diesel engine and put in a bank of batteries, and the studio is now powered by a wind turbine up the mast and solar panels on the roof. So during the day I store up energy in the battery bank, and I can work through the night without needing anything from the grid at all.
Considering your concern with the environment and the kind of post-apocalyptic landscape you created for your game and your album, how much significance was there for you in getting a hold of that lifeboat?
Well, it was tremendously significant, and it inspired me in other ways, because from the wheelhouse of the lifeboat I have a 360-degree view of the ocean and marshes behind, and the coast that I live on is facing Europe, and so there's therefore very vulnerable to invasion from invading forces. So there's the remnants of defenses against Napoleon and Hitler and various others strewn around the coast, and there's a big container port just near me, and these massive container ships go in and out rather like they do here in the Mississippi, and at different states of the light they look like floating cities. It looks like the Manhattan skyline out to sea. So I started, while I was recording the album, I came up with this concept of a sort of dystopian future in which mankind can no longer exist on land at all because it's either flooded or it's too hot, and so our species survivors have to take to the seas in the hulls of abandoned ships. And so as I was making the album, I thought, well, I'm making this concept album, but people aren't buying albums these days. They're playing video games, they're in social networks. So maybe the metaphor I need for this is something more like an online multi-user game. So I'd never created one of those before, but I'm quite familiar with writing software because of my company Beatnik. So I found some volunteer programmers, and we set about creating the Floating City game. And that launched last year and has brought a whole new glut of players into the game, many of whom were hardcore Dolby fans, but some of whom were just gamers who knew nothing about my music at all. So it's turned out to be a good way to reach out to a new generation of fans.
Actually, I'm interested in the social activism part of kind of alternate reality gaming, which is a term that I think is really just coming onto the scene. But you worked with Andrea Phillips on the game, and she has actually done some storytelling activism ARGs with around the TSA security and interesting stuff like that. And I was wondering if you could talk about that aspect of bringing people together around your game, especially considering that your tribes, you use geolocation to place people into tribes with people that they're actually geographically close with.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because a lot of players have met in the game and then have come to my gigs and they've arranged to meet beforehand in a bar and stuff like that. Sometimes I come on stage, there'll be a little gaggle of players from the 17 Hills tribe and they're chanting their names and stuff like that. So it's definitely a good sort of way to socialize from that point of view. But yeah, I mean, I think that, I was limited to off-the-shelf technologies pretty much. We did some coding, but we used things like Google Maps. There's an API for Google Maps that allows you to create your own overlay to a Google map. So the map of the floating city is actually built on Google Maps technology, but it looks like fictional space. So all of the tribes there, the coastlines roughly approximate to, if you're looking down on the North Pole from space, the northernmost continents. But you can scroll around and zoom in the way you would with Google Maps.
You'd mentioned in some, as you've spoken about the game, that you actually went back into your archive and pulled in music that you had created into the game, characters, objects you'd created throughout the years, and that that along the way, Thomas Dolby fans throughout history, have kind of created their own fan fiction around some of these characters, and you followed that. And I was wondering how much you felt like there was a collaboration between your fans over the past couple of decades and these objects and characters, and what made it into Floating City.
Yeah, well, I mean, during the 18 or 19 years that I was making no music at all, the internet sprang up, and there were these websites and forums where people would go and they would analyze my songs and create interpretations of the lyrics, and they'd do cover versions for my birthday and stuff like this. And many of them took on the handles of names of characters from the songs, like Europa, Leipzig, Budapest, whatever. And some of them started to create fan fiction where they would actually write scripts collaboratively, going back and forth and writing these stories. And I thought, well, this is really cool. If there's enough mythology in the lyrics and the song catalog for people to be interested in this, I need to get my arms around that and actually create a springboard for more people to do that. So that was also part of the genesis of the game, and the creativity of the players in the game was inspiring in and of itself. I mean, Andrea Phillips, when we started talking about user-generated content, she said, well, between you and me, don't hold your breath, because sometimes it can be a bit crap, But even she was blown away with the creativity of the players in the game. So you start out the game with a number of items in the cargo of your ship, random items, which are all objects from the game, from the songs. Names from the songs. There's a big database of these, and your goal is to trade them with other ships, and therefore to move northwards by rafting up to trading ships. And it was just really interesting to see that the Dolby fans that knew the lyrics well would sometimes have to collaborate with the gamers who knew more the conventions of online games, and so knew what kind of things to look for. But people started coming up with their own inventions by combining the objects in their hold. Like one guy built a blimp and started offering tickets to fly to Budapest in the blimp, which is another song of mine. And he then applied a patent for it, and people thought patents were a great idea, so we actually had to create a patent office and give people a little scroll every time they got a patent.
That's really interesting, because it seemed like the patent became a big part of the game, and you're saying that actually evolved out of the users?
Yeah, I mean, the users themselves demanded it, because there's various freak events happen. Like there was an attack of techno pirates, and there were sort of poison mists and things like that, and that would set you back. If you didn't protect yourself against them, they set you further south, and you had to recapture the time. But people started saying, well, if I can protect myself against techno pirates by combining this mirror ball with this ape in motion, is there a way that I can be protected against the effects of the techno pirates? And so if you were granted a patent for that, then yes, you'd protect it.
I think we're wrapping up, but I'm wondering, as an artist, to have kind of all of your work kind of come together and actually kind of congeal into like this one entity, and how does that feel for you? I don't think a lot of artists have that opportunity that happens.
Well, I've always been very sort of inclusive, I mean, going back to the MTV days, I wrote the storyboard for the video for She Blinded Me with Science before I wrote the song. And so I've always enjoyed doing that, and I like the fact that it forces me to learn new skills, pick up things that I'm not very good at. Music I know pretty well inside out, but I'm not good with coding or with mobile phones or with video cameras, and so I like learning a new skill like that and seeing how creative I can get with it.